it's a book that really came from the heart, really telling the story of the southern resident killer whales that frequent Puget Sound.
So hello everyone and welcome. My name is Clarissa and I am the program and volunteer coordinator at the Puget Sound Estuarium. One of the programs that I run is called Discovery Speaker Series. With Discovery Speaker Series, we will talk with an artist, a scientist, an earth advocate, an educator about their current work every first Thursday of the month. So for this Discovery Speaker Series, I am pleased to welcome Lynda Mapes here to our Zoom panel. Lynda is a Seattle Times environment journalist, as well as an author of many books, one which was going to be our new exhibit. And so this book, Orca, Shared Waters, Shared Home, was turned into an exhibit that we'll have at the Puget Sound Estuarium starting November 6th, going until January, about this third week into January. And so you have plenty of time to come and visit it, but January 16th will be the last day of our exhibit. And so to tell you more about this cool book and how it started, I'll pass it off to Lynda.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you all tonight, and I want to thank you very much for what you do. You know, the Puget Sound Estuarium is really a treasure, and as a matter of fact, Puget Sound is a treasure. Puget Sound is a very unique and special place. It's the second largest estuary in the United States, and it's hard to remember that it is an estuary, and it truly is, because we get all the salt water pouring in the Strait of Juan de Fuca from the Pacific, mixing with all that fresh water from the rivers that pour into Puget Sound. And so what we wind up with is this spectacular place of shallow inlets and bays and very deep fjords and quiet coves. And, you know, it is a place that's home for everything from shorebirds to all kinds of invertebrate life in the benthos, to, of course, the salmon and the forage fish that feed the salmon, and so much more. So, you know, Puget Sound and the estuaries of Puget Sound are places that you can discover your whole life long. You could do nothing but read about the science and the cultures of the people along Puget Sound all the way back to thousands of years and never run out of interesting stories. And so I salute the Puget Sound Estuarium for what you do, and thanks for bringing the Orca exhibit to the Puget Sound Estuarium. The exhibit's very special. It includes panels that have been made by colleagues of mine at the Seattle Times, beautiful photographs of orcas taken by my colleague Steve Ringman, spectacular photographer, incredible scientific illustrations by my colleague Emily Eng of the Seattle Times. She put together these graphics that show you everything from the home range of the orcas, everywhere that they hunt, to even the inside of their head, because they have a remarkable ability, something called biosonar. It's actually even more complicated than sonar. It's echolocation. They can send out a beam of clicks to find their food, salmon, in the dark, no matter how deep, no matter how fast the salmon is swimming. They can just hit it with this sonar beam from their head and it bounces back to them, and they have the ability to see an image of the swim bladder inside the fish to be able to determine what species it is. Wow. They can see inside one another. Each knows when one of the members of the pods is pregnant, just like several members of the pod are pregnant right now in J-pod. So these are incredible animals. You know, they're not sea pandas. People tend to think, oh, they're so cute, because they are incredibly beautiful. But what these really are top predators in every ocean of the world. And here tonight, I'm going to give you a bit of a treat. I'm going to show you some of Steve Ringman's remarkable photos of orca whales that we took while we were out in the field doing this book called Orca, Shared Waters, Shared Home. And before that, a series of stories in the newspaper, the Seattle Times, which is still online for you to see. If you Google Orca, Shared Waters, Shared Home, you will see all 5 parts of the series are still there, which includes many documentaries and online features you can't see anywhere else. I really recommend it to you. But these pictures I'll show you tonight were photos that Steve took while we were out doing this field work. And then I'm also going to show you a video that I took while I was out in the field with orcas not long ago. So I'm going to leave plenty of time for your questions. That's always, for me, the really fun part, is to see what's on people's minds about orcas or salmon or Puget Sound or this ecology of this miraculous place where we're so lucky to live. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show you these slides.
So as Lynda mentioned, you can type any questions that you have for her in the comments of this video, and then we'll get to them at the end.
Hopefully everybody's seeing that really well, right? So this is the book, Shared Water, Shared Home. And it's a book that really came from the heart, really telling the story of the southern resident killer whales that frequent Puget Sound. You know, they have a very vast foraging range. They actually go after their food, Chinook salmon primarily, all the way from southern BC, all the way down to California. That's why they're called the southern residents. But every now and then they come here. Now's the time when they come, because they're looking after, as a matter of fact, those chum salmon that are headed down where you are. Chum salmon, the second largest salmon in Puget Sound. And this is the time when the southern residents come here to chase those fish. So we'll start seeing them, even in Elliott Bay, downtown Orcas. Who's got that? Pretty special. So I want to explain a little bit about how this story started for me at the paper. You know, I'm an environment reporter, so I write about all kinds of things, from logging to Puget Sound to, in this case, orcas. So why? What happened? Well, she happened. This beautiful mother orca, her name is Tahlequah. That's her common name. Her scientific name is J35. She's a J-pod whale. And as you can see, as you look at this picture, you realize there's something amiss. And what it is it's her calf. It's her baby calf that she gave birth to in the summer of 2018. And that baby was the first baby born to the southern residents in 5 years. And it was a female at that, so very, very important. But as you can see, she's carrying that calf. The calf is not swimming, she's carrying it. You see this shape up here by her head, that's her calf. Perfectly formed, about 6 feet long, weighed about 350 pounds. And Tahlequah had begun doing something that scientists know very sophisticated, socially sophisticated, very intelligent animals will do when they lose a family member or a beloved. This giraffes or gorillas or dolphins, also orca whales. They will grieve. They will stay with the beloved that they have lost. And that's what she was doing, you know, just as in the Jewish tradition of sitting Shiva, staying with the one who's lost. She held on to that baby and kept carrying that baby day after day after day after day. And I made a decision at the paper that we were going to stay with her. You know, we were going to witness what she was grieving and what she was going through as a mother. We just felt that was a really important story to tell the region. And we didn't know where it was going to go or how long it was going to take, but you know, we went out one day with her, and here's the photo that Steve took. It took us all day to get this photo because we're out in an open boat, first just trying to find her. And then secondly, it was very hard to photograph the calf. Sometimes you couldn't see it, it was below the water line. And then finally, the very last shot we took that day, one frame, the only frame that worked was this photo, which turned out to be really the emblem for the whole story, the whole series, and really the book, Mother Orca Tahlequah with her calf. In the end, it was 17 days that she carried that calf and more than 1,000 miles. And I honestly don't think she ever let it go. I think it just finally fell apart. And everyone was so worried about her. Would she be okay? You know, was she eating? Was she going to come out of this? What would she be all right? Because she's such a valuable member of the pods, because she's a midlife whale. She could have lots more babies. But then eventually, you know, after the 17th day, there she was seen swimming without the calf, and she seemed no worse for wear. And it seemed to us, you know, that was the time to really take the next step with the story and dig in and learn a lot more and teach a lot more about this animal that had been a thriving species in our region for 10,000 years. And how could it be that an animal living in this beautiful place, such as this part of the San Juan Islands there, Mount Baker in the distance, you look at this photo and you think, what could go wrong? What could be wrong? How could it be that these animals that have been here for so long are not thriving. And we decided that we would really try to penetrate to the roots of this extinction crisis of salmon and of orcas and explore both aspects. And it was clear to us that a lot was already changing with regard to these orcas. These orcas in this photo are at the west side of Salmon Island, which is a place where they had always traditionally returned to in the summer, chasing salmon going to the Fraser River in Canada. It was very typical that you would see them every day shuttling up and down the west side of Salmon Island, going to the Fraser River for fish and going back down again, and really using that rock wall on the west side of the island to just funnel those fish that they were chasing. But by 2018, 2019, they really were rarely seen. They were barely showing up at all. And the reason for that was their prey was not present. The Chinook salmon were not present. They had changed their migration patterns, which was a signal to us, to we humans, that something was changing for these whales. So they don't come here for us, they come here for food. So we went north. We decided we needed a control group, if you will, to try to figure out what was wrong for the southern residents. We went north to go see the northern residents. So the northern residents are the same animal. They are a resident type of orca. They eat salmon obligately. They don't eat anything else, just like the southern residents. And yet these whales are doing great. They're increasing in population year after year. They have lots of babies. Everywhere we went, we saw them. It was so unlike the experience in the Salmon Islands, going out with scientists. There was always so much drama. Would we see them? Would there be any whales? Would we be able to photograph them at all? Here we saw orca whales everywhere we went. We were up around Hansen Island and Alert Bay area, Broughton Archipelago, and this beautiful male northern resident was very typical of our experience. We weren't even looking for whales. He was just off the end of our boat. We're like, okay, fine, we'll take your picture. and we discovered as we were there talking to scientists, what was different from the northern residents was they lived not just in another place, but in a very different world. Much cleaner water, much quieter water with less shipping traffic, and more fish, both in numbers and in variety of salmon. And so they just had a much better living situation than the southern residents. That told us two things. Number one, this is not some crybaby species, right? They can't get it done. No, this is a powerful species, top predator in every ocean in the world. And if it has what it needs, it'll do just fine. And the southern residents do not have what the northern residents have. The southern residents, you could think of them as the most urban whales in the world. I mean, they're living with us down here in Puget Sound and San Francisco and Vancouver. These are the black leather jacket whales. They're urban orcas. And they're having a terrible time with all of our boat noise and our shipping traffic and greatly depleted fish runs. And as a matter of fact, pollution in their food. Those are the three main challenges for the survival of the southern resident pods: lack of adequate, high quality food, and too much noise in the water. And those three things interact, they work together, because the southern residents like us, they're not fasting adapted. They need to eat every day to be at their prime. And if they don't eat, they burn their fat, also just like us. And that's exactly where the toxins are stored. So these three forces interact. And if salmon runs are scarce, which they are, that makes boat noise much more important. It doesn't really matter if there are tons of salmon anywhere, they're everywhere, they're gonna catch them. We know this from the past when the orcas were more abundant and so were the salmon. We also know it from the transient orcas, a different type of orca that also lives in these same waters, eats marine mammals, seals and sea lions. And those orcas are doing great, multiplying like mad. And they're incredibly big and fat, really robust. But not the southern residents. In fact, the southern residents are the only marine mammal in Puget Sound that is not doing well. We have more humpbacks, more gray whales, more porpoises, more seals, more sea lions than in a generation. It's spectacular. Puget Sound is boiling with life, but not the southern residents because they need salmon. So that's what we learned when we went up north and looked for this contrast with the northern residents. A little bit more about the orcas as a species. They've been around in our world, in all of oceans, for 6 million years. So they're a very ancient species of great antiquity. You can really think of the southern residents, which have been around since the ice melted about 10,000 years, as an ancient society. a society of families of great antiquity. They are organized into 3 pods, J, K, and L. They have their own language. They have greeting ceremonies. They pass on their culture of what they eat and how they catch it from one generation to the next. The families are very tightly bonded. They stick together for life. They are completely unlike us in many, many important ways. They have almost no known aggression towards one another. They share their wealth. The female whales lead the pods. These are matriarchal societies. And they have very, very large brains, far larger as a proportion of their body size than our own. In fact, they have parts of their brain we don't have. We don't even know what they're for. We just know we don't have it. So whenever people say to me, oh, they're just like us, I think, don't flatter yourself. We should be so lucky. One more thing about just the biology of these animals. There are 3 types of orcas. There's only one species, orca. It's the same animal everywhere in the world, but they're different types. And in the northeastern Pacific, where we live, there are 3 types. There's the resident orcas that prey primarily on fish, only fish, primarily salmon. You've got the transient orcas, or pigs, killer whales. They eat marine mammals, seals, sea lions, even baby gray whales. And then you've got the offshores, which are very rarely seen, and they eat sharks. This is the thing about orcas that needs to be appreciated. People will often say to me about the southern residents, oh, they're just so picky, they should eat something else. This isn't just like a southern resident pain in the neck thing. Orca whales, no matter the type, wherever they live, everywhere in the world, they only eat what they eat. They are what they eat. They've learned how to catch a certain kind of prey utilizing the environmental features of where they live. And they're taught, they all are born a blank slate, but they're taught what food is by their mothers. And it's a rule. You don't eat something else. If you're a southern resident, you don't eat a seal. They know how to kill them. They will even pack them around under their pack just for fun, but they will not eat them. And likewise, if you're an orca whale off the coast of Patagonia, you've learned how to snatch baby seals right off the beach. Or if you're an orca in the coastal waters of Australia, you're ripping the livers out of great white sharks. Or if you're an orca whale up in the far Arctic, you've learned how to hunt like a pack of wolves and push a wave of water at an ice floe and rinse those seals right off the ice into your waiting jaws. They're incredible predators. They have very long teeth, about that long, very heavy, dense as marble, and ripping sharp. And not only that, they interlock. So, rip, shred, tear, ram, whatever it is, they can get it done. Like I said, they're not sea pandas. They're really not. Here are teeth. These are orca teeth. These are actually Namu's teeth. This is where I want to talk a little bit about our own personal human history with the southern residents. It's not a happy story. Back in the late 60s and into the 70s, we actually had a capture era in Washington state where anybody who wanted to could go get themselves an orca, chase it with a helicopter and a harpoon gun, or chase it with a speedboat and firecrackers, and chase the families into coves and drop a net and separate out the young ones because they were the cheapest to ship, and send them all over the world to aquarium for profit. We lost a third of the pods to the aquarium trade. And there's only one left today who's still alive. Her name is Tokatai. She's still in captivity at the Miami Aquarium. She was captured as a baby in Penn Cove, and she's still there. I can't even believe it. But these teeth here that you're looking at, those are at the Burke Museum of Natural History and Culture in Seattle. Those belong to Namu. He was the world's first ever captive performing killer whale at the Seattle Aquarium, not the same one of today, an earlier aquarium, down at Elliott Bay. And Ted Griffin, who still lives in the state of Washington, went up to BC, and a fisherman had caught the northern resident whale in his net and offered it to Griffin for sale. So he went up there with a backpack full of cash and bought him and brought him down to Elliott Bay in a net pen pulled by a tugboat. And you know what? He was welcomed as a hero. The mayor gave him a key to the city. There were thousands of people who turned out thrilled to see this captive killer whale. And he taught Namu how to do tricks. He even put a little little rope around his mouth, and he would ride him like a horse. You know, we look at that today and we shake our head and think, how could that have ever happened? But honestly, it's interesting. It really changed how people felt about killer whales. They used to think of them as these random, vicious predators. But once they saw them up close and they could see how actually gentle they were, even with somebody like Ted Griffin riding on his back, how much he liked to be scrubbed with a brush because it felt good on his skin, and how he used to like to come to Ted's hand for a fish, or, you know, touch a ball with his head that Ted would hold in the air. You know, people began to see this animal very differently and to become fond of orcas, and then ultimately insist on ending the capture era. Today's SeaWorld still has many captive killer whales, and for many years they bred them in captivity. But they have since changed their tune. They say they will no longer breed captive killer whales in their facilities. So all those whales eventually will die out, and there will be no more captive killer whales in the United States. There's a big movement to try to save Tahlequah, bring her home from the Miami Seaquarium. I have no idea if that will ever happen. Government agencies would have to approve it. She'd have to survive it, you know, but it is an incredible thing that she still lives there and in a tank all by herself. Okay, so after going north, we decided to look more closely at what was happening in Puget Sound, right here at home with these killer whales. So that's me out on a boat with Brad Hansen from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And we're looking at the JCAN L-pods when they came down here in the wintertime, as they're about to. They'll be coming here soon. And Brad was doing a health survey, basically visually looking at them. Do they look good? Do they look thin? Do they look healthy? Are they moving right? Is everybody there? You know, a census of the pods. But he was also scooping up their poo. He had a very long handled net, and anytime he would see some whale poo on the surface, it looks like dog kibble, smells like fish, he would grab it and put it in a test tube and take it back to a lab where they would analyze it. Now, why would you want to do that? Poo is actually a real gold mine for a scientist. You can see hormone levels. You can tell a lot about whether the animal is hungry or thriving. And you can also tell what they're eating. Not only that they're eating salmon, not only what type of salmon, but even where it came from. What DNA shows you about where that salmon came from. Now, why would you want to know that? So that you can have a better sense of the salmon that these whales depend on, so that you could get a little better sense of the rivers that are top priority for restoration to try to keep these endangered pods from slipping away. I want to talk a little bit about the human bond between people and killer whales. What you're seeing in this picture is a bunch of people up in Bellingham at a Unitarian church, and they're putting their hands and praying on a totem pole that's been carved by a member of the Lummi Nation to take down to the Miami Seaquarium as a protest against the captivity of Tahlequah. And you can see the intensity of the expression on these people's faces. They're really fervently hoping that she will be set free, and they're just really praying over this totem pole of an orca. This human bond with orcas is very ancient. It goes back to the first people of this place, and you know, the Lummi Nation, they understand the killer whales as the Quiltalmachtin, the people who live under the sea. Relations, actual family members, not just like random expendable animals, but high-class people and members of their family who are to be respected and taken care of. Orca whales have never really been hunted by any of the indigenous people. They tend to be regarded as chiefs reincarnate and afforded a very high standing in their culture, including in song and ceremony and dance. So orcas need salmon, and salmon need rivers. And this is where the survival of these pods, these endangered southern resident pods, there are only 74 killer whales left of the southern resident pods, which is a very tiny number. You know, they are depending on us to take care of the rivers that twine through Puget Sound country. This is the Green River, and it is Seattle's only river. It flows into the Duwamish. And you know, the upper Green is actually locked up behind a dam called the Howard Hansen Dam, which has no fish passage. So you ask yourself, how could that be in the year 2021 that we would have a dam on a major salmon river in Puget Sound country without any fish passage? And indeed, the Corps of Engineers has been instructed by the Federal Fisheries Agency that they must take steps to provide fish passage at that dam. Dam removal, retrofitting dams for better fish passage. These are all things we can do for salmon, but we can do other things too. When you look at this habitat here, this has all been restored by investment by the people of King County and other government agencies under the direction of the King County Council and the King County Flood District to move back levees and give the river room to roam and reconnect with its floodplain, to take out armoring, to plant native plants and restore the shoreline so that it's a place that has shade and cools the water. And you might ask yourself, well, I thought we were talking about killer whales. Why are we talking about rivers? Well, of course, because that's where the salmon are that these killer whales need. So it's important to remember the connections between the freshwater environment and the marine environment and the ocean where these orcas live. It's not only that, it's also the near shore where these beautiful forage fish live. This is a herring that I'm holding in my hand. I'm out on a ocean cruise with some scientists surveying the marine environment where baby salmon go when they first come out of the rivers, trying to understand what's limiting their success. Why aren't they getting nice and fat and surviving out there? Well, one of the things that's got to happen is they've got to have forage fish to eat. That herring is a crucial source of food. It's packed with fats and enzymes and minerals and vitamins. And you know, these herring, they actually need a beach. They need a healthy near shore environment where eelgrass grows, these wonderful pastures of seagrass in the near shore. That's where they feed on little tiny copepods and other tiny animals and become healthy and strong. And so it's all connected to the rivers, to the estuaries, to the beaches, natural shorelines where forage fish like herring can lay their eggs, and eelgrass and sand lance can actually come all the way up on the beach and spawn. You have to have a natural shoreline without armoring, without docks, without bulkheads, without walls, so that the shore is constantly replenished with sand coming down off the bluffs, and it's shaded by trees, and you have insects and leaf litter dropping into the near shore where these baby fish can feed. So it's all connected. There's this wonderful saying in Coast Salish country: little fish feed big fish, feed blackfish, right? Forage fish feed salmon, feed orcas. Herring are incredibly beautiful. Look at all the color in that animal. I mean, fish are underrated in terms of how beautiful they are. They're just incredible. The University of Washington Press published a beautiful series of books a couple of years ago. It's called Fishes of the Salish Sea, and it's widely available in libraries. And these are watercolored portraits of all the fishes of the Salish Sea. It's really a treat. And I felt very lucky being out on this cruise. They would bring up the net and I would get to see some of these fish while they were still ocean bright. And, you know, you look in that eye and you think, what is that fish seen in all of its thousands of miles of travel? And don't ever forget the forest. If you love orcas, you need to love trees. As I said, this is a connected continuum of life, from the uplands all the way to the salt water, all the way to the estuary, all the way to the beach. These lowland forests of the Cascades, these magnificent trees, they do so much for salmon. They keep the water cool, they hold the soil, they shed all sorts of insect life and litter into the water that feeds the young fish after they've hatched out. They're key, absolutely key to the productivity of the entire ecosystem. There's a really beautiful cycle of life that plays out in some parts of Alaska and in BC, places that are still really quite wild. And it's a triangle of life between salmon and bears and trees. The bears will drag the salmon that are returning to rivers into the forest, and they'll eat the salmon underneath a tree. And the nutrients from that decomposing carcass of the salmon will actually find their way into the tree itself. If you were to sample the wood of a tree in that forest, you would find that it has marine-derived nutrients in it. Nutrients from the sea in the land. Not only that, but those nutrients travel through the mycorrhizal fungi, through the soil far, far inland, a vasculature of these roots carrying these nutrients from the ocean all the way interior to the forest. What a beautiful system and cycle of life. And so I like to think about the orcas as ambassadors for this whole system. And really for all of Washington, we're really one Washington that they unite, because whether you're in Eastern Washington by a salmon river, or you're in Puget Sound, or you're up in the North Sound, it's all connected by the salmon to the sea. And these orcas depend on every bit of it. Unfortunately, too much of it looks like this. This is the Green River in Tahlequah. So, you know, if you're a salmon, look at this from a salmon's perspective, not good, right? I mean, this is the second largest warehousing district now on the West Coast, and it's made a lot of prosperity for a lot of people and a lot of convenience. This is how you get that buy with one click order at your door prime in an hour. Well, that comes at a cost, right? I mean, we've lost this river as a productive salmon river. And, you know, let's face it, if you're a salmon, this is not working for you, right? There's no shade. Can you imagine how hot the South Bank gets in the summer? Nice place maybe for a paved bike trail and a parking lot, but it's not good for salmon. So, you know, if you think like a salmon, it's not hard to diagnose what we need to do to help the orcas. Some places are going to be hard to fix. I mean, there's so much infrastructure here that's, you know, look, this probably isn't going to change a lot. You can at least plant the banks, you can make it better. This is always going to be a tough place for salmon, which simply means that the other places that are still in good shape have got to be protected. We can't keep losing habitat. And where we can make changes by taking out mistakes of the past or just things we don't need anymore, I call it hydro trash. There's a lot of stuff out there that nobody even uses anymore. Dams that don't make a kilowatt, old seawalls, all kinds of crap. You know, we can spend the money to take that out of the landscape so that nature can respond and heal these places, and it will. I mean, you can count on it every time. We're not there. This is California. This is San Francisco. We went down to California to take a look at the California winter Chinook, which are the salmon that the southern residents used to rely on when they would go. They go all the way down to San Francisco Bay in the wintertime looking for these fish. Now, I don't know if they're getting any or if it's just a memory at this point that they're working off of. You know, this is San Francisco Bay seen from the plane as we were landing. I said, Steve, you got to take this picture. I don't know, it looks like something from outer space, right? You know, fortunately here in Puget Sound, we have not yet developed to this extent. And, you know, I would say, I hope we never do. For the sake of the salmon and the orcas, you better hope we never do. But there's something more subtle too that I want to talk about with regard to this, which is that people in California no longer think of themselves as a salmon state. And they were, you know, the Sacramento River used to be second only to the Columbia as a salmon producer, and not very long ago. You know, but as it is, the salmon there, it all started with the gold rush. Everything happened first and worst in California for salmon and native people. And, you know, by now the salmon run are so diminished and nobody can fish for them. They've kind of faded from public imagination, public life. Steve and I, we were out on this river all day, the Sacramento 105 degrees with this biologist looking for winter run Chinook in a spawning survey. We did see a few poor struggling fish. And at the end of this very hot day, we went and got some dinner and, you know, got a salad and like 6 glasses of water. We were just like dying. And the waitress takes our card, you know, our credit card in, and I said, oh, Seattle Times, what are you doing down here? And I said, oh, we're doing a piece on orcas and salmon. And she said, oh, I don't get cable, so I don't know anything about that. I thought, how sad is that? You know, she doesn't even know that there's still salmon here and that the orcas come all the way down here. So the point is awareness. You know, we still have awareness as ourselves, as salmon people, and that every stream we cross, every river we see is a salmon river. And as long as we hold on to that, I think it's going to be okay. We have to hold on to that identity as salmon people. That's who we are. And this is a salmon place. And we share these waters and this home with these beings that have been here since long before us. This is my favorite orca. This is the oldest orca. This is L125. She was born, we think, we don't really know, of course, but we think she was born in about 1928. That's incredible. I mean, she was born before any of the dams were built on the Columbia and Snake Rivers. She was born back when the population of Washington was about 1.5 million people. And she's still out there. I mean, she was seen as recently as a few weeks ago. Believe me, I check all the time because she means so much to me. You know, she's the matriarch of all the matriarchs in the JKNL pods. And so she leads them to fish, especially when times are tough. She's the one with that vast, deep ecological knowledge of where to go to find the fish. And when she finds it, she shares it. I just think that's so beautiful. And I think of her and I think of us, all of we people living here now. And I just think, you know, we owe it to her to make sure that as we gain our prosperity, we do not take from her what she needs. There's a lot of reason for hope. It is not too late at all. Puget Sound is boiling with life. It's a spectacular place. It's cleaner than it's been in generations because of the investments that we've made in modern sewage treatment. The water, the sediments, all of it, it's cleaner than it's been in many decades. Furthermore, there are more marine mammals than there have been in many decades. Why? Because we passed a federal law that outlawed killing them. It works every time. You know, these are the sort of broad scale, societal level, governmental policy changes that we need for these animals to survive. I do think individual action is very important, both so you yourself feel a sense of personal integrity and honoring of these beings with whom we share our lives, but also as an example to our friends and neighbors and families. But it's not enough. You know, we really need Washington to adopt an independent fund for salmon and orca, some kind of dedicated fund for orca habitat, or there'll never be enough money to make the kind of fixes we need to make today. We need to do much more to preserve and protect Puget Sound, and we can afford it. We just haven't come up with these really handy things called taxes. I'm from New York, where we have these things called taxes. It's really good. You know, if you want like schools or public health or wildlife, comes in super handy. So Washington, you might want to think about that. Just, you know, a friendly tip from an outsider. What can I say? But, you know, this orca right here, this little baby that you see, you know, she was born just 2 years ago. She's still out there. She's doing great. There have been 5 births to the southern residents in the last 3 years. This is excellent news. And there are 3 pregnancies in the J-pod alone right now. So, you know, that's good news. And to me, this is just a work song for all of us to think about. You know, Tahlequah, she's had a calf since the one she lost. So may that next calf live and thrive and grow up, and may there be many more. That'll be up to us to do that. I think the thing that I want to leave you with is a sense of empowerment and hope, because it's not too late at all. And these are incredible animals. Orcas and salmon, you know, they can do it. Salmon have radiated into every possible habitat since the Pleistocene. This is a very tough adaptive animal. They'll stray into new habitat if it can get it. When we took the 2 dams out of the Ilwa River beginning 10 years ago, those fish were back in places they hadn't been in 100 years. I mean, within days. And so this unbuild it, they will come thing is really true. I mean, you can count on nature. If you give these animals the chance, give them what they need, they'll take care of the rest. And unlike so many other big problems in our world, we actually know what to do. You know, I don't know how to bring about world peace. I don't know how to get people to wear masks if they want to. I don't know how to do any of that. But I can tell you, if what you want is more salmon, it's as simple as cold, clean water running downhill, period. And we know how to do that. We have more engineers and geomorphologists and experts who know how to do this probably than almost anywhere else in the country. And we have an excellent track record. We've taken down more big dams in Washington than anywhere else in the world. And, you know, dam removal, it's not the right answer everywhere, but there are places where it certainly is. You've got dams out there like the Enlow Dam on the Sumilkameen River. It's been sitting there not without making a kilowatt since 1954. Why? You know, it's blocking like 100 miles of salmon habitat. So these are the kinds of things we can come together as a community to do. It's going to be a very exciting next couple of years in salmon country. The Klamath dams are going to be coming down. 4 dams. These are gigantic dams. That's going to open 100 miles of spawning habitat for Chinook salmon. And the Klamath River, which empties into the Pacific Ocean in the far northern tip of California. So hopefully maybe that'll benefit the southern residents a little bit too. You know, there's a lot of good work going on out there in salmon country, and we just need to do more of it. And one thing we can be sure of is that every time we do it, it'll work. These are some of the talks that I have coming up in the next couple of days. And now I want to show you that video that I told you about, just because it's fun. Perfectly good reason, right? See if I can find the darn thing.
Never say no to a video of orcas.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Sure. I mean, why not? I'm having trouble getting it done though. Let's see. Oh, I see what I need to do. Okay. Now I can do it. I got it. Gotta think about it. You go here. I'm gonna open this. I'm gonna play it. So I like to show this really just as a treat. What's going on here is I was out in the Orca boat, the research boat with Brad Hansen from NOAA Fisheries. I'm sitting there in the newsroom doing something boring probably, and he calls me up. He says, Lynda, we're going to go out. We're going to do a health survey. You want to come? Like, no, I'm going to stay at my desk. I got to make a phone call and check my email. Yeah, of course. God, you're kidding me? I'll be right there. So Steve and I shagged on out to the Don Armini boat ramp, which is in West Seattle, and went out on this in the Zodiac boat with Brad and a couple others. And this is what we saw, for Pete's sakes. I mean, JK and L pods. Yeah, hi there. And honestly, it was the first time they'd been in Central Puget Sound all winter. And everyone was so thrilled to see them. And they looked so good. They looked really healthy, big and fat, super athletic, beautiful day, right? As Puget Sound could only deliver on a nice winter late afternoon, that gold light that we get, you know, it's just magic, right? Enchantment. There's no other word for it. It's enchantment. And I like to show this because it's really important to be open to enchantment. Let yourself be swept away by the beauty of this place, the wonder of this place, and these miraculous animals. I mean, look, who else has got this? Nobody. Pretty special. But look how social they are. Look how active. Look how playful. They're just messing around. They were headed towards Elliott Bay. They were literally headed downtown. Wow. And they're making all kinds of noise going off, I think just for fun. I love the sound of that breath. It's like a sound from the beginning of time. And it reminds us, you know, they're mammals like us. They live in families like us. You know, just incredible animals, really. And so, you know, I show you this just to share a little bit of the joy that I've been able to experience with these animals out there on the water, but also, you know, invite you to feel the wonder of this place where we live. You know, I mean, it's miraculous. I love this moment here where he's just playing dead. I mean, like, why? Just for fun, I guess. Just like we do, floating on his back. Just for fun. You know, it's important for this stuff not to be all about gloom and doom and extinction and dire this, dire that. It's also about fun and joy and enchantment and beauty. And the orcas, the salmon, Puget Sound, they deliver that in spades. So celebrate this incredible estuary where we live. Know that you live in a miraculous place and that you have a role to play both in celebrating it and in preserving and protecting it. And so with that, I would love to hear your questions.
Thank you so much, Lynda. That was such a great presentation. I loved this book. I loved reading it, and especially the part where you talk about how the Lummi people, how they relate so well to the orcas because they've also experienced their children being taken away. It just
Goodness.
hit me so hard there that like, ooh, yeah, I need to do something. I need to act on this.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, Clarissa. I mean, the parallelism really between the first people of this place and their experience with what they went through and the capture era of the orcas, it's direct. And it hit me really hard too. And it made me appreciate in a whole new way all that we really have to make up for, in terms of that. And the other thing that it drove home for me is survival. These are survivors. These animals are, these cultures are, and we are all in this together in terms of making the most of where we are now here today. And I was so grateful for all of the Indigenous wisdom that was shared with me in the course of reporting this book. There were a lot of really special moments. I remember going out with a couple people from the Lummi Nation to do a ceremonial feeding in the summer of 2019, because a lot of whales had died, and there was a sense of wanting to do a memorial for them and also do a ceremonial feeding for the whales who were struggling to get enough to eat. So we got up very early in the morning. We went out on their police boat, complete with a little siren and light on top. And we took with us some salmon that had been given to the Lummi people from the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife Hatchery, which I wondered, are the orcas going to want that? They're not the right color, right? Because once they come into the river, they change color from that silvery brightness they're used to the darker color. I don't know, maybe if they're hungry enough, they'll eat anything. We had those, and then we went out and we stopped and visited with fishing captains. We saw out tribal fishermen out on the water. Did they have any fish? Have you got any fish? Nobody had any fish, which was very sad. And so then we were just looking for the orcas, and we didn't see them either. Well, of course not, because there aren't any fish, right? But then something really important happened. The idea was to give something to the whales. And even though we couldn't find the orcas and we couldn't find the salmon, the idea is that it was still important for us to do something for them. And so we docked the boat on a beach at an old village site of the Lummi people on Orcas Island. And the ceremonialist that I was with picked some blackberries and some ferns and cedar boughs and floated the berries out onto the water on these cedar boughs. The gesture being one of gift, and the message being that whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you have, to share that and to give it as an honoring and a sharing. And that really hit home with me at this time when we're all wondering, well, what can we do? There is something that each of us can do. And I think that the other thing that was so beautiful to me was he sat down and he sang a song that his grandmother had passed on to him about the high class people, which is how they call the orcas. And it was a song of memory for the ones who had passed on. And then he paused for a minute and he said, I hope they heard me. And then he waited a minute and he said, I'm sure they did.
Like, yeah, they got great hearing, right? So they can probably hear.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So we do have the questions coming in.
All right.
There have been recent reports of a large salmon population in the Strait of Lynda V. Can you talk more about that and implications on the southern residents?
Yeah, I wrote that story. Look it up in the Seattle Times, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. I'll tell you, I have to say this one was one that really made me feel like the scientific process works. Here's why: because the scientist went out and determined that there was a large population of salmon when he looked where he looked. And that paper was published, and it instantly drew a big response from the community of scientists that have been studying the southern residents the longest, basically saying, oh, you didn't look in the right place. And it really doesn't tell you anything about the fact that there were a lot of salmon in one place when you looked. Big deal. That's not where the orcas are foraging now. They're foraging someplace else. And just that there's a lot of fish in one place one day doesn't mean that there's enough fish for these whales everywhere they travel. And I thought to myself, that's really, and the comment I liked the most came from Brad Hampson, actually, who said, look, this is just an idea right now. The way science works is you put an idea out there and other people see if they can replicate it. That's the scientific process. And right now, there's no reason why this should change our understanding of what's going on or what we should do about it. It's one idea. So let's replicate it first and see if it stands up. And I thought, well, that is excellent. That's how the scientific process is supposed to work. And I thought it was great, honestly. And I was glad we put it on the front page. I'm glad we played it really big. the whole debate about what had been found and then what people said about it. And it just made me feel that the people on the job, so to speak, the scientists out there working in this space, were being really diligent.
Yeah, the cool find, but you got to make sure that that is everywhere before saying that it's fact.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. Is it just like a one-off? I mean, good for you. Plenty to eat right there that day. And they weren't even there, so whatever.
So another one was that your video brought them joy. Do you feel like you got to know the personalities of any orcas in your experiences and studies?
You know, I'll answer that a little differently because I never really spent a lot of time with any one orca, but I will tell you this, the one of the first things that I learned as a reporter working on these boats with these scientists, with these orcas, is that the idea that you're going to sit there and take these great meticulous notes is like ridiculous because you're so blown away when you see them. Their eminence is so devastating. I mean, they come into your space, they dive under your boat, they come right up to the boat. People would say, oh, are they afraid of you? It's like, are you kidding? Talking about a 6-ton animal that swims 35 miles an hour. I mean, every time I would see them, I would just be so rattled and so blown away by them. It was hard for me to do my job. And I have a funny story to tell you about Steve Ringman. You know, we were out together with Deborah Giles from Wild Orca, who's a wonderful scientist. We were out with her, and Steve was feeling so proud of himself because he brought his GoPro. You know, he's going to put it in the water and film the orcas as they're swimming by. And indeed, a pod came and swam right under the boat, and we were just aghast and amazed and all the things. And I said, Steve, did you get it? He said, I forgot to turn it on. So, you know, that's how it goes. And I would say, you know, not only did I have such a sense of joy, rapture, really, witnessing these animals just being themselves in the wild, living their life, but honestly so humbling and just so overwhelmed by the beauty of the experience of being with them. And there was something about the sound of their breath, that deep lung purging exhalation, and then sometimes I could hear their calls would come traveling through the water. An air bubble would pop and you'd hear their calls. I mean, they're incredible animals, and they're so playful with each other and so affectionate. You know, you're not really prepared for that. All this sort of horsing around and sliding down each other's backs and sculling along on their back underwater just for fun, and swatting a pectoral fin on the water just to hear the sound. I mean, they're goofy. They're. I've often heard it said that play is a sign of intelligence in animals, and man, if that's the case, they got it going on. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's been one of the great joys of my life to be able to spend any time with these animals. It's been marvelous.
Do you have a count of how many times you've seen orcas?
I have to think about that. Never as much as I want. I mean, to me, boat time was always the most precious time of the work, you know, when I would actually get to be with them. It's maybe a dozen. I would rather it was like hundreds.
Eventually, right?
Yeah, right. Maybe so. Right.
Another comment was that they felt so lucky to see and hear your video, and that another question is, are there any orcas or any orca or conservation projects that you are currently working on?
Right. Right. I cover the orcas all the time, kind of whenever something happens, like that study a couple of weeks ago. I'll write about that. There's a new paper that just came out that I haven't even read yet. There's always something. If the question was, are there any orca conservation projects, like workout that people can be part of, there is a lot of that. And, you know, I would really encourage people to just prowl around online and find something that suits you. I guarantee you there's something every weekend, like a native plant planting something, or a salmon enhancement something. We live in a very great place for that. So I would almost guarantee you there's something going on this weekend. Yeah.
Do you know, or do you have like a favorite organization that you would like everyone to donate to help?
Ooh.
Or can you not say?
Yeah, probably I shouldn't say, but I will say this: there are a bunch, and there isn't a bad one. Really? If there's one out there that's part of the Orca mission that appeals to you, you like their style, you like the particular piece of this that they're going after, yeah, it's all good. It all counts. And I would say the same thing about salmon enhancement groups. You know, there are these wonderful local salmon enhancement groups. There's one down there in South Sound Fisheries Enhancement Group. It's terrific people doing great stuff out in the field for salmon.
And then another question, what would you like people to take away from this talk and the exhibit?
Hope.
Hope.
I really want people to feel hope about this because, as I said earlier, you know, unlike so many other things where we don't even know what to do, here we know what to do and we know that it works. I mean, these are physical systems and they respond to physical improvement, temperature, gradient, flowing of water and sediment freely in a river. These are things we can do, we know how to do. And all you have to do is allow nature to resume those processes and salmon and then orca can thrive. So it's not a matter of opinion, it's not a matter of guesswork, it's a matter of doing these projects in the places where it will make a difference and then just standing back in awe, honestly. I mean, it's pretty spectacular. At this point, we're taking out more armoring and riprap than we're putting in. Thank you, legislature, for changing the rules. Thank you, people, for, you know, taking out armoring and riprap just on their own when and where they can. Thank you, legislature and federal government, for paying for large-scale riprap and armoring removals on beaches, which are restoring these natural shorelines. Thank you for all the NGOs that are working on dam removal and making it happen all over the state, small and large. The dam removal on the Nooksack River I like to talk about 2 summers ago. This was a water diversion dam put in by the city of Bellingham 100 years ago. And, you know, of course, it's falling apart like a lot of stuff out there on the landscape, hydro trash. And, you know, they looked into it and they discovered it was going to cost their ratepayers so much more money for them to fix this darn thing and bring it up to modern standards. It would be cheaper just to buy the water from the city of Snohomish and take it out. So they did, and they got 10 million from the legislature, and the Tahlequah tribes put in some money, and American Rivers provided the technical expertise. They got it done in like a summer. Boom, suddenly after 100 years, Chinook salmon were back in their old spawning grounds. So better for ratepayers, you know, better for salmon, better for orca. You know, dam removal is no longer this sort of hippie hellion thing. It's like a mainstream community problem solving tool, and it can be just the ticket in some places, not everywhere, obviously. You know, there's some dams that are still super useful and critically important, but there are also all kinds of infrastructure out there built in the 1900s, early 1920s, 10s, that's not doing anything for anybody, and it's blocking habitat and getting in the way. So you asked me, what do I want people to take away? I want them to understand that this can and should be and is being done, this kind of habitat work. And write to Maria Cantwell and Patty Murray and Governor Jay Inslee and your legislators and tell them you live in Washington, you vote, and you care about orcas and salmon, and you want these things done. And I'll tell you something, they get an actual letter with a stamp in a handwritten envelope, and they're like, wow, this is like all of us. We get a real letter, we think, wow, did somebody die? What happened? It makes quite an impression, an outsized impression. So if you care about this, of course you should vote, but you should also be in touch with your elected representatives and know that you care about this. They will notice, they will.
Wise words there from Lynda. Thank you so much for coming. If anyone has any more questions, type them quickly so we can get to them. Otherwise, yeah, we partnered with Capital Land Trust and we'll be out at Bayshore Preserve, which used to be a golf course, but now they're going back into an estuary habitat.
See, my point.
Salmon docents out there, so you can come watch the salmon swimming up the stream. We'll have GoPros in the water actually filming.
Wow, how cool is that? Okay, so my point, right? What did we say? You can do it. And it works. Used to be a golf course. Now you can go watch the salmon come home, right? How great is that? That's just thrilling. Wow. Yeah. Next thing, Capitol Lake. You guys got to get on with that. It would be so much better for everybody if it was just the estuary that it's supposed to be, right? What's the biggest nitrogen nutrient producer in South Puget Sound? Is it the sewage treatment plant? Oh no, it's Capitol Lake. So, news you can use. What can I say? Just, a little bug plant in your ear.
We hear it. Yep.
It used to be an estuary. Just saying.
So if anyone doesn't have any more questions, then thank you so much, Lynda. Great having you. You can come, everyone can come visit us at the estuarium. This weekend is going to be the debut of our orca exhibit. We'll have a bunch of panels. We have a bunch of marine mammal artifacts for you to look at and observe. And we'll also have a sheet for you to sign up, put your name down, put your email down, so that you can contact representatives about removing the Snake River Dam. Hopefully promoting more action that way. So when you visit us, you can then take action and try and help out our southern resident orcas. And then our next Discovery Speaker Series will be December 2nd. And we'll have Thomas Quinn, who is the professor of aquatic and fishery sciences at UW, who was in Lynda's book, which is how I heard about him and requested him.
He's fantastic. He fact-checked all my salmon stuff. He's the man. He's the one. One of them anyway. He's fantastic. He's quite an expert. He knows salmon.
Yeah, well, we'll learn about salmon then, learned about orcas now, and you all took the first step and you became aware of the southern residents and why their population is endangered compared to all the others. And so thank you everyone who came and joined on this DSS. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we'll see you at the estuarium for the exhibit.
Thanks, Clarissa.